Shabbat Shalom, everyone. It's Friday again, and this time it's Parashat Vayigash. And we're joined by a special guest today, Meital. Hello, Meital. Meital is just turned 5 about a few days ago. So, Mazal Tov to Meital. Do you want to say Shabbat Shalom?
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. And today we're going to talk about something very interesting, which can actually be food for thought in a way. In our parasha, we find the story of Yosef. You learn about Yosef in Gan? We find the story of Yosef.
No, in Talmud Torah.
In Talmud Torah. And after the famous beginning of the parasha with the dreams of Pharaoh, when Yosef is brought out of the bor, they brought him out of the pit, of the jail, and he becomes the viceroy, the Mishneh LaMelech. He becomes the second in command of Egypt. We have the whole interesting story, the drama between him and the brothers, which very much was started in last parasha. And in our parasha, Parashat Vayigash, we have the face-off between him and Yehuda, and in the end, he reveals himself. I am Yosef, your brother, your long-lost brother. You sold me down to slavery, or you caused me to get sold down to slavery. I'm alive. Is my father alive? And let's all be happy families together. Now, most people usually think that's the end of the story of Yosef, but it's not. Because at the end of our parasha, we have a very interesting little window into... looking at yourself in the camera. We have a very interesting window into the economics of Egypt. Okay, you ready to get down? Okay. Say Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
And in the economic situation of Egypt, which, continuing on from the dreams of Pharaoh, is going through all sorts of interesting kind of changes from bad economic times to good economic times, or should I say rather good economic times turning into bad economic times. And part of the beauty of Yosef is he is able to tell Pharaoh, it's time that we planned ahead and allowed the 7 years of plenty to basically store that up and prepare us for the 7 years of famine that are coming ahead. And indeed, when it comes to the famine itself, Yosef has all of the grain. And the people of Egypt come to Yosef to receive the grain. And in the end of the parasha, basically in the last chapter, there's a whole intricate back and forth between Yosef and the people at different stages saying, okay, we've run out of money. How can we buy grain now? With the animals, with the land, potentially even with themselves in a certain way, kind of being indentured servants to, or maybe serfs, or maybe even slaves to Pharaoh, and selling their own, you could say, freedom for the sakes of surviving, for the sakes of food. And there's a certain tone, which when I read the parasha, I thought to myself, that's a very unique phrase. I don't seem to recall that appearing in the Tanakh much, and I looked into it, and indeed, there is a certain phrase, a certain word, which in other forms does appear quite often, but in this specific form only appears basically in 4 different places in the Tanakh. And I would like to, and if you can humor me maybe, to try and build a modern-day midrash on the 4 places where this word appears and try and find some sort of theme that connects all of these different places where this word appears. We see when Yosef acquires all of the land of Egypt, we see in our parasha, Vayiken Yosef et kol admat Mitzrayim leparo, ki machru Mitzrayim yeshsadeu, ki chazak aleim ha'ra'av, v'tiyeh haaretz leparo. And Yosef acquired, Vayiken, and he bought, basically, for bread, for the price of bread, all of the different fields and estates of Egypt. Each one of them sold it to Pharaoh and basically kind of nationalized the agricultural system. And then we see that he himself sent out a proclamation to the people. Vayomer Yosef el ha'am. He sends out messengers and he proclaims. And Egypt's very good at proclamations and big, kind of tablets with these important statements written on them. Hen kaniti etchem hayom ve'et admatchem. I have acquired you today and your land. Leparo, for Pharaoh. Helachem zera v'zara'atem et ha'adama. Now you work for us. You are officially, this is like a deed of sale, you're officially acquired by Pharaoh and you and your land. And this phrase, kaniti, I had to look it up how many times the word kaniti appears in the Tanakh. And as I said, it appears in 4 different places. It appears here, talking about Yosef acquiring the land and the people for Pharaoh. Although interestingly not quite clear what the status of the people was, but the land for sure belonged to Pharaoh. It appears later on in Megillat Ruth. You coming back? Hello. Appears in Megillat Ruth. And the story of Boaz, the last chapter of Megillat Ruth, when Boaz, the hero of the story, is planning on marrying Ruth, we see that he also needs to go through a whole legal case as to who will own the land of Naomi's family, of Avimelech's family. And then likewise in Ruth, we find there is a proclamation, and he says, indeed, he proclaims, Vayomer Boaz lazkenim velchol ha'am, edim atem hayom. And Boaz announces to all of the people there, to all of the judges and their audience, you are all witnesses, ki kaniti et kol asher le'Elimelech. I have bought everything that belonged to Elimelech, which is basically the land, right? Ve'et kol asher lechilion machlon miyad Naomi, ve'gam et Ruth ha'Mo'aviyah eshet machlon, and Ruth ha'Mo'aviyah as well, kaniti li leisha lakim shem hamet. So likewise, we find another case where someone is now being acquired, or maybe you could say a legal status has been changed of the land and the person and the identity. And this kind of got me looking at the other places where it appears. And interestingly enough, we also find this with Kohelet. In the book of Kohelet, King Solomon writes about when he was at the very beginning of Kohelet, where he's trying to kind of, in maybe a hedonistic adventure, trying to experience everything that's available. And he kind of really, as a millionaire, as a rich man, tries and spends lots of money on different things. So he says, Higdalti ma'asai. I really, splurged out. Baniti li batim, natati li kramim. I built houses. I planted vineyards. Asiti li ganot ufardesim. I made gardens and orchards. V'natati b'hem et kol peri, with all the different fruit trees. Asiti li brechot mayim. I made pools, lashkot mehem yard someach etzim, and I planted forests around them. Kaniti avadim v'shfachot. This is another place where the word kaniti, and here interestingly again, it is the acquiring of slaves. This is ubnei bait hayali gam mikne makar v'tzon arbeli mikol asher haya lefanai b'Yerushalayim. And I went above and beyond. Indeed, we see that he describes all of these different things, and then in the end he argues, but yet it wasn't worth it all, and philosophically, I'm going to die, and then what's all this wealth worth? But likewise, we find the interesting experience here of kaniti being, again, referring to physical, land, trees, fields, and also people. And the last place that I feel will kind of connect all of these ideas and maybe give us a different philosophical bent is the very first place where the word kaniti appears in the Tanakh. And the very first place where the word kaniti appears in the Tanakh is indeed with the very first child ever born in the Tanakh. Ve'adam yada et Chava ishto. And Adam and Eve had a baby, Vatar vateled et Cain. And she gives birth to Cain, who is called Cain because Vatomer kaniti ish et Hashem. I have acquired man with God. And here, interestingly enough, the word koneh, if we look into the dictionary, I'll be with you in a second, Levi, okay? You want to come show them? Mitali has made a nice birthday crown, which we're going to put on her sister, who's actually having a birthday on Shabbat. Bezrat Hashem Nachon. Levia, amazing. So you keep going. Try the pink. How do you do some more pink? Can you do some flowers? Kaniti, in this case, has multiple different definitions. Kaniti could either mean to acquire, or it could also mean to create, which is why we say, for example, in Tefillah, we talk about God as Koneh HaKol, which doesn't mean he's a shopaholic. It means that God is the creator, the acquirer of everything in the universe. And likewise here, Kaniti Ishet Hashem, there is an element here of maybe this is now the new identity. Now I have this child. We even say, I have a child, even though you don't have anyone. It's its own human being. But there's a certain element of this. And beautifully, ותוסף ללדת את אחיו את הבל, they have another child, ויהי הבל רועה צאן, וקין היה עובד אדמה. There's a deep relationship between Cain, Kaniti, and Adama, and land. And now here we've drawn a line between 4 different dots. And the question is, I can just imagine you guys saying, what's he going to do with that? And it's not quite clear. But I would say if I was in a midrashic mood, I would say that when it comes to land, when it comes to identity, a personal identity, ownership, who am I, as we like to say, own who you are, right? Own up to your own identity. Being the idea of who owns me, who do I serve, what ideas do I serve, what is my main goal in life. When it comes to identity, indeed, is very often connected to land. We see this element of being, this is the land of my forefathers, born in a specific place. We very often talk about national identity, geographic identity. I'm European, I'm Asian, I'm American, all of these different elements. And I think when it comes to the question of identity, very nice, very nice. Go show mommy. Can you go show mommy? Oh, wow, go show mommy. When it comes to the elements of identity and kinyan, the question is always, who is it for? And here I come back to our parasha. When it comes to Shlomo, he acquired it for himself, and it was very much a selfish element. When it comes to Boaz and Ruth, it's very clear that this is an acquisition which we'll see through the Megillah is something looking forward towards David HaMelech, Mashiach. This is building the future, and this identity that is being formed through the land, through Beit Lechem, where David HaMelech will be born, through Boaz and Ruth, Imashal Malchut, as she's referred to, the mother, the matriarch of kingship, which in essence continues all the way down to Mashiach ben David. This element, this identity, this connection through land and personality, the question is always, where is it focused? In Bereshit with Chava, it says, Kaniti ish et Hashem. It recognizes that if there's the triangle of man, land, there has to also be God. In the triangle of identity, there needs to be all 3. While with Pharaoh, with Yosef, beautifully, it says, Vayomer Yosef el ha'am, hen kaniti etchem hayom v'tadmatchem leFaro. If in that triangle, in that pyramid, you don't have man, land, right, and God, but you have rather land, man, and Pharaoh, that is a dictatorship. That is false idols. That is false gods. That is false identity. Instead of using all of the powers, recognizing that everything comes et Hashem, from God, your identity is an identity which is focused towards progression, towards the will of God and fulfilling the plan that God has in creating the world. If you take it for your own personal case, for example, in Kohelet, where it's all hedonistic, or if you take it in our parasha with Yosef, where it's dictatorial, the state trying to impose itself on everyone else because they can, that is a I would say, a challenge. And beautifully, Rav Yoni Grossman, in his book on Yosef, shows how the rest of the Tanakh is in polemic with Yosef's economic plan, and basically shows how, as we get the Torah, a lot of the things that Yosef does economically and legally become illegal, whether it's we see in Shemitah and Yovel and all different things. You cannot tie down a person and make them a slave for all time. That creates Beit Avadim, that creates the house of slavery, which we need to leave from. And that, I think, is a message that we can get from our parasha. So with that, I wish you all a Shabbat Shalom, and may we, Be'ezrat Hashem, constantly, whenever we analyze our own identity, whether it's through land, the land of Israel, whether it's through our own personal identity, who owns us, what are we enslaving ourselves to, may we always remember, Kaniti ish et Hashem. Shabbat Shalom.